Welcome back. So what you did see there is a copy of our volunteer mileage reimbursement form. I will tell you this is a fillable Microsoft Word file, so if you ever need it, you have one there, and because you can always print that or download that from the training. Well, it would be just above this video. However, I do want to talk about this. Now, the Casa of the 8th Judicial Districts does have a volunteer advocate mileage reimbursement policy. If you are visiting us from a different program, then I would urge you to find out what it is for that program if they have one. So you can be reimbursed for mileage for case-related travel if, under the certain circumstances, you have to be in compliance with our reimbursement policy. All right, we're going over the reimbursement policy now, so pay attention. 75 miles or more round trip or approval of the executive director. So gas can be really expensive. We cannot always, we can't, if you're going like 1 mile to the agency to meet with a caseworker and 1 mile back, that is not something that's reimbursable. Typically you have to be going out of town, which is where we come up with the 75 miles or more round trip. It doesn't have to be 75 miles out and 75 miles back, but just within 75 miles. Okay, the other thing is you have to complete this form and you have to submit it with your monthly report, which you can do electronically or just email it in. We do have to have sufficient funding. We do try and hold funds aside for this for the volunteers that reach out and ask for this. Now, what I will tell you is that these require a check, and our board of directors requires every reimbursement check to go through the board meeting. So you're going to submit it by the 5th of the month. We don't have board meetings till the end of the month. We have them on the 4th Thursday, except for the month of November, in which case we have them on the 3rd Thursday. And then typically we don't have any in December unless there's an emergency. But I do get mileage reimbursements done about the middle of December for the previous month. Now, what ends up happening is they want to make sure the board members, at least 2 other board members, are seeing it and approving it before I can issue it. So these are done with actual paper checks. Make sure we have your most up-to-date address, because the address that we have on file for you is where we send that check. Now, the other piece of that is they are paper checks, so we will send it to you once it's approved, but there is that delay. You're sending it to the beginning, but then they do it at the board meeting. They review all of these. What I will tell you is right now we currently have a grant that will cover mileage to visit the child. So if the child is 10 miles away, technically you can, so you're only doing 20 miles round trip. Technically right now I can add in that expense just for visiting the child. Now, it's only at the charity rate for IRS, and this is all in your policies and procedures, and that has been 14 cents a mile for the past few miles. However, we have a grant that covers this currently, and so go ahead, put in for it. We do not mind going through the work of getting that check issued to you. Just consider it a thank you. We understand gasoline can be very expensive. This is why we put this in place. We want people to do this. We have a lot of volunteers that are like, I'm not going to bother. It's only like $5 or something for the month. I'm not going to bother. That is your choice. We are happy to reimburse you for things like that. Okay. So, moving on. It's getting exciting here. You ready? The next steps. Okay, so we're doing all this preparation on this JOT form, and it is for what is going to happen at the final interactive session next time we meet. But like, what happens after that? Well, in our jurisdiction, there are some next steps, and one of the things that we're going to talk about now. Okay, first, what is going to happen? If you have completed training through our program, like our program, this is all you'll need. In addition, if you've completed your court observation, and we do a minimum of so many hours of court observation, and all your background checks have come back. Now, this is where we hit the delay, especially if we had to go to out of state, because there are just delays sometimes. Once that's all done and you have completed this training and everything else is set, we will find a day and time and we will contact you and give you some options when you do need to actually come in and be sworn in by the judge. Now, we can do, it does not have to be on a Wednesday morning in Geary County. Like, I pick on Geary County because they're very specific in when they do it. So it does not have to be in Geary County. It can be in whatever county within our jurisdiction. And it doesn't have to be on the same day that they hold that child in need of care, their sync docket. It could be at any point in time. Now, what ends up happening is typically, like a Wednesday morning in Geary County, the hearings start at 9. They would arrange this for 8:45. So we could go in, you could be sworn in, and then you could leave. Now, at that point, you can have family members. People have had their spouses. People have had their children with them. We typically take a picture, but the judge gets really excited and swears you in. And that's when you're going to actually sign an oath of confidentiality, again, as an official CASA volunteer advocate. You do have to sign one of those confidentiality agreements when you're watching the court observation. This is the second one. This is basically you signing on as a CASA volunteer advocate with the program. And it's also signed by the judge. You will get a copy of that. In fact, you get the original copy of that, but we do have to have a photocopy of it. Now, what ends up happening is at that point, you're officially sworn in. That means you are now eligible to take a case. And you now have to start doing monthly reports every month. Until you are sworn in by the judge, you do not have to. Okay, so after that, we're going to talk about you're assigned. A lot of times, even when you're getting to those last steps, I'm already looking at what cases we could potentially assign to you. So here is how we assign a case. All right, this is a process, so please keep in mind it can sometimes take some time, okay? All right, so we will get notified that we have a new case, or we know that we have a new case. However, if we're assigned to a new case, we'll receive a file. We get notification. Sometimes I'm sitting in court and it happens, or sometimes I get an email notice, or sometimes I get some other kind of notification that we have been assigned to a case. The next step that has to happen is I have to receive that case file or access to that case file so that I can then review everything in our jurisdiction. It goes through me. And so I read everything. So then my next step is, who do I think is going to be the best person, the best volunteer advocate that I have available? They have to be available for this case. Now, I said they have to be available. That is because we believe in the one CASA, one case. So that's one child or one sibling group. I have had occasionally CASAs say, look, I've got the extra time. I have the ability to take a second case. There are limitations as to whether or not that can actually happen based on the number of children involved and things like that. However, let's say that those are very few exceptions, and we really prefer one CASA to one case so you can really focus on that case. So let's say I have you are one of 3 potential volunteer advocates that do not have a case that I think would be a really good fit. So the next thing that I would do is I would reach out to you. Let me back up one step. I don't make that decision in a vacuum. I do consult our Morris County case supervisor, and I do consult our outreach coordinator to see if they have input. So, all right, moving on. So I'm going to reach out to you and I'm going to say, hey, how are you? I have a potential case for you. Now, sometimes this can be by email, sometimes it's by phone. I'll be honest, I prefer email. I'm really not one that likes to talk on the phone. And despite the fact that I talk a lot during these trainings, I actually am not one of those people that likes to talk a lot. All right, so I'm going to reach out to you in some way. I'm like, I have a possible case for you. It has 2 children, ages 6 and 9, and the children are located in Hope, Kansas. That's within my jurisdiction, right? Are you interested? And you're like, well, maybe. Yeah, I mean, so far, great. You'll notice that I have not given you any real information. I have not breached confidentiality at all for this particular case. I do it very carefully. All right, so if you say yes, I will give you a little more information. All right, we think this is a physical abuse case. It is a case out of Dickinson, Kansas, Dickinson County. We are at the point where we just finished our temporary custody hearing, but we haven't had adjudication yet. Are you still interested? And this is where you're going to say yes or no. So at any point in time you say no, I'm going to like, all right, no problem. I will reach out when I have another case, or if I have another case, it's like, okay, well, I have this case. So at that point, I would go to the next person and offer them as well. Okay. So let's say you say, yeah, that sounds fine. I live in Abilene. Hope, Kansas is not that far away. It's only a few minutes away. It's in my same county. That's fine. Great. The next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to send you an oath, and I will either make arrangements to meet with you, and we will, because I can notarize that myself, or some other way. If you go to the courthouse, they'll notarize it for free as well. But this oath is an oath of confidentiality, and you're gonna be like, wait, Lisa, you just said I did a confidentiality oath when I swore in front of the judge. That is true. You need one in that oath to follow Supreme Court Rule 110, as well as complete confidentiality for any and all cases or anything you hear as a CASA volunteer. You additionally have to sign a confidentiality oath for each case. Now, the idea behind that is that you are acknowledging that this case, you're going to have to keep it confidential in perpetuity, even after you're long gone from being a CASA volunteer advocate, or the case has been closed years and years ago. It is still never going to be open for you to speak about. And so there needs to be a very case-specific one per Office of Judicial Administration for the state of Kansas requirements, as well as Kansas CASA Association and National CASA Association. Everybody gets in on this one. We want to make sure that everybody's aware, so they all require us to sign this oath, and that's what that notarized, it has to be notarized. And so that is where we are. Now, that is something that we would potentially meet together, because I can notarize, or we can make arrangements, or you can bring it to whatever notary you need to. Usually we try and stay within the court system, or we try and stay within myself, only from the standpoint of we don't want to breach confidentiality. So very important. Okay, at the same point in time, I am going to complete that judicial counsel form. Now, we have talked about the judicial counsel form from day one in this training. This is the form that is signed by the judge that gets you access to everything, whether the educational files or therapists or medical records, and you don't have to worry about FERPA or HIPAA or anything like that because of this. I fill out and complete that form, and then I send it to the judge for the judge to sign, and then they file it in the case, and then I get it back. And when those two things are done, when I have that notarized oath that I need the original for, and I need that filed copy of the judge's signature on the judicial counsel form, at that point, you are officially assigned to the case. So before then, you're potentially assigned, you're tentatively connected to the case, but until both those forms come back, you are not officially on the case. Once those forms both come back, I immediately will send you an email. This is where, remember, we talked about those emails, and I recommended the Gmail that's separate just for your CASA stuff. That's where I would send this particular case file, and that's going to be everything. Court notes, journal entries, petition, anything that has been filed, or anything that we have, any information that we have on the case up to date as of that moment is what I will send in that email. So that's a lot. All right. I do need you to be patient. Sometimes it can take some time to get the judge to sign off on this or that and the other thing. And so it's really one of those things that I want you to, it can take a couple of weeks. It can take 24 hours. I never know how long it's going to take. And a lot of it depends on how quickly we can get your oath notarized and how quickly I get those forms signed back and filed by the court from the judge. So the other piece of the puzzle is, although you have then read the whole case file, that's your first assignment. You're like, okay, I have my case. I'm going to put this on your monthly report, of course, under W for written. So you're going to read through the whole case file. That first read is crucial. First of all, it's going to get you up to date on your case. That's the very first thing. Second of all, this is going to tell us if there is a conflict of interest. Let me give you an example. We actually had a case in Dickinson County. I had a wonderful volunteer, and she went ahead and she's like, yeah, I'll take that case, no problem. Great. Filled out the form. She saw the name on the case. She saw everything. Everything progressed on. I sent the case file. She read the case file, realized that the family lived just around the corner from her. The words were not coming to my brain. Not enough caffeine today. And so what happened is she realized those children and her children attended the same school, played at the same playground, were involved in some of the same stuff, and that she might even know who they were. At that point, she believed she would have a conflict of interest because, especially with the kids playing together. Okay, perfect. All she has done is read the case, and she has already signed that and had that notarized oath of confidentiality signed. So at that point, I just withdrew her from the case, and I found someone else to take over the case. And she was open to take another case. That can happen. It's one of the reasons why when you read through, now sometimes you can find that conflict of interest happens at any point in time. You didn't realize it. If you're concerned there might be a conflict of interest, but you're not sure, please reach out to me. I am happy to help you determine whether there is or not. Okay, so I wanted to talk about that. Now, what I am going to put here, so what I include down below that I want you to look at next is the actual document that is a copy of that oath that you would be signing and taking in front of the judge. I don't want it to come as a surprise to you when we talk about the next step. So if you will watch that before you move on.